I'm going to do a very quick recap for those who weren't here this morning in the first half of this earlier in the afternoon. So basically what you missed was an introduction to design thinking as sort of the history of design thinking, where it came from. And the main points that I wanted to make about that was that there's a lot of different flavors of design thinking out there. Okay, so there's sort of the Stanford flavor of design thinking, which is sort of empathize, define, ideate, prototype, and test. And that's kind of the most common one. But I wanted to point out that they all share the same basic approach. You start by trying to identify or understand or empathize or kind of dig into your target audience, your customers, understand who the user is, understand who the human is, if it's human-centered design. They all sort of do the same thing. And there's various ways you might go out and observe your users, empathize with them, understand them. Then you kind of come up with ideas, and you come up with a single idea, and you build something, and you test it, and you refine it. So those are all the different models, and the one that I'm going to be going through is one that I kind of have made up, which I like because there's an acronym, so it's easy to remember the steps, and basically this is what we're going to be doing for the rest of this evening. We're going to quickly go through this entire model. So again, it starts with understanding who your customer is. Then we're going to try to understand how they lead their life. We're going to identify a possibility, come up with some mechanism to enact that possibility, build it, evaluate it, and repeat it. And so the stage that we're at worked out pretty well. It's to identify and understand who your customer is. And what I'd like you to do in your little groups, thanks for splitting up, you guys did well, is to really think, who are your customer? Are there different customer types in there? So we broke it up into groups. You have your segments. And what I want you to do is each group will have about, let's say, 12 minutes to come up with a persona. So a single individual to represent that entire group. And it's a bit counterintuitive. Many people think you want to identify a group and you don't want to be too specific, but ironically, or for some reason, it works out much better if you identify a single person and really try to understand what she is like, for instance. So this is student Susan. She spends the evenings reading. You know, her fears are this, her dreams are that. And you kind of build up. I know it's a bit of a stereotype and you're going to have to rely on your own intuitions here. If we were doing this for real, what we would do is you'd go out and you'd find people like that, or you'd interview people like that. So you try to go to a prison and speak to the prisoners, or talk to kids and see what they love about toys, what their ideal toy would be, draw your favorite toy, things like that. So what you're gonna have to do is kind of just make some of the stuff up, and that's fine. It's we acknowledge that it's gonna be a little stereotypical, but it'll still be useful. You'll still find some good insights, I think. So that's roughly what you're gonna do. Here's a bit more specific. So what are they like? How do they spend their time? So you'll have to have a name of the group, of the individual. What are they like? How do they spend their time? Why would they want whatever it is you're thinking about giving them? What are they like psychographically and demographically? Sort of what age are they? What kind of, how do they spend their time? What activities do they do? What are their dreams? What are their pains? What are their lifestyles? Is there any natural division? Yes, this was student Susan and she likes to spend, but we also have, her friend who is whatever, cheerleader Cindy. That's a horrible example, but whatever it might be. So if there is a natural way to segment them, do that as well. And so just spend about, let's say 12 minutes thinking about who your persona is. Try to make it as rich as possible. All right? And go. One other thing. You'll see on the table there are some sheets, and they say frustrations, hates, loves, etc. You could put them out and start putting little Post-its on there. What frustrates them about their life? What do they love about their life? Okay, so fill them with Post-its. All right, so time is up for the first bit, but don't worry, you're going to have more time to do more on your group in a second. So that was basically the first phase. Actually, sorry, before I go on, I'm just curious. Let's pick one group. How about at the back, you guys? What's your rough space and who's your person? What are they like?
There we go. So we did a trader that does cryptocurrencies.
Cryptocurrency Craig? Does he have a name?
Yes,
Craig.
Cryptocurrency Craig.
Okay.
So we got a lot of different things. For example, like for love, we had, it's high profitable, but I mean, on the other side, hates, you can lose money. So we kind of had both sides of it. What else we got?
Any other loves or Just one more love, let's say. What else does he love about
Fast-paced environment. So,
yeah.
so
Adrenaline junkie.
Yeah, adrenaline rush.
Awesome. That's great. That's great. Okay, perfect. All right, so I'm hoping that every group has lots of little loves and hates. And as you think of more, feel free to just write them down. You don't have to talk as a group. Just start putting them out. These aren't like written in stone. These are just rough ideas. We're going to kind of keep evolving and developing them as we go. And now the next stage, which is actually still sort of part of the first phase, is life. So we need to understand, so we now have customers like Cryptocurrency Craig or whatever. Now you need to think about how they spend their life. How do they spend their time? Are there kind of ways that they do things that frustrate them? So if it's Cryptocurrency Craig, is there some particular journey that he has to go through or some process that he has to go through that he finds frustrating? So understanding life, the concerns, dreams, aspirations, frustrations, lifestyles, journeys, all of those kinds of things. I have a couple of little examples. This first one is, it's almost just an excuse to show one of my favorite ads ever. Have you guys seen this ad, this Google ad before? You'd probably recognize it here. No, it's a great little ad. And it's a nice example, by the way, of them understanding how their customers spend their time and how to pull in more customers and to try to create an emotional link to their product. So one of the things I'll talk about later is that for something to be successful, yes, it has to make life better, but usually it also has to have some emotional kick, if you will. And so this is a nice example of that. See what you think. Aw, pretty good, right? I mean, I think that 30-second ad is better than most movies that are made. But anyway, it's a pretty good ad. And it's done a great job of understanding not just who their customers are, people who want to search for stuff, but also how to pull them in. The other thing that's brilliant about it, by the way, is the entire ad, of course, takes place in their product, which is pretty rare to find. But it's a nice example. And they really had to understand how people want to use Google, how they might use it, and how can you get an emotional hook into something as simple as a search. Here's another kind of example. This is a bank, Umpqua Bank, out in, let's say, the Northwest. And when at some point, this new president came on board and he decided he wanted it not to be a bank like old school financial banks, but instead he wanted it to be more of an experience. I mentioned earlier the experience economy. This is part of that movement. And so he did some research. This isn't that interesting, actually, but looking at how different banks present themselves, what kind of personality different banks have. One of the things I'm going to have you do later is think about the brand of your product, because again, the brand is a big part of any kind of product. Anyway, so he redesigned all of his banks, and this is what the new banks looked like. So that's actually a bank. You go in there and you can hang out and have some coffee, and here's one of their more urban settings. So again, this is a bank. You come in, help yourself to coffee, sit, do some work, and as you're there, someone will come up and chat with you. And here's another one, sort of feeling a bit more like kind of an Apple Store environment, not like your traditional bank. Here's the last one, very much like an Apple Genius Bar kind of thing. And it worked really well, this idea of kind of using design thinking to redesign the nature of the bank itself had a huge impact. You know, they were hoping to get over 10 million, they got over 50 million, so pretty successful. And I've been using that as an example for a couple years now. And just recently I found that now Capital One is doing the same kind of thing. I don't know if they have one here, they have one now in Boston. There's Capital One Cafe. Reimagining banking, and I'll just show you this little video. It's kind of an ad of theirs, but it's also pretty nice. It shows you all the features they've added, and think about it from the perspective of a customer, right? So we've been thinking about customers and how customers spend their lives, spend their time, what journeys they go on. So check it out, see what you think. Woo.
My job is just talking to people all day, just having genuine conversations about whatever it is that customer is looking to talk about, whether it's about money or whether it's about coffee. It's there if you need it.
We were just at the farmer's market and saw the Capital One Cafe.
It feels easier to approach someone and actually ask them questions.
Money is one of the most stressful situations for families, for individuals. So this is a space where they can come in and reduce that stress entirely.
It's kind of a personal touch. It's really a cool place to do it.
I work in a bank, but it's not a regular bank. Like, we're not like a regular bank. We're a full
the crew working the coffee bar right there.
Meeting people, having interaction with them, making friends along the way. I really love that.
I know deep down in my heart that no matter who walks into this space, they'll get something out of it. It's a space where customers can utilize and make it their own. We are changing the way that people bank. We're changing the way people feel about finance. We're changing the way people feel about money. To be able to educate customers in a less stressful environment is an opportunity that I cherish every single day.
So, like I said, it's a bit of an ad there, but it's pretty cool. And it's a great concept, it's done well, and it works really well. The thing to keep in mind, like I said in the earlier part, the earlier afternoon, the idea here is that they didn't just come up with this idea and make it happen. They actually came up with it through a very careful process of research, of understanding what people's attitudes were about money, what stresses them out, what do they love about money, what do they hate about money, what do they find frustrating. When they go to a bank, what do they find intimidating in a bank, how would they feel more happy in a bank, etc. And it's really about understanding this kind of life journey that people are on. And so that's what we're going to do now. Now it's time to empathize. If we had access to the real end customers, we could go and talk to them, but really it's all about this. It's about understanding what people think and believe, what they love, what kind of behaviors they have, what life journeys they go on. Are there segments of this, like buying the toy, this is the toy group, buying the toy, unwrapping the toy, opening the toy, playing with the toy, finding the toy if it gets lost. There's lots of different segments of toys, and so each of those kind of presents perhaps an opportunity. So I want you to now think through the various segments or the various activities that the person might have to do to engage with your thing, and start to kind of come up with points, notes, observations. The main thing here is this: do not solve problems. So let's say, buying a toy, it's often a pain to get it out of the package. Why don't we just don't answer the question. Don't try to solve the problem. Just note the problem for now. Right, so this is one my wife always tells me I'm so bad at. She doesn't want me to solve her problem, she just wants me to hear her problem. So it's going to be hard especially for the men, I hate to say, but what you need to do is just start documenting facts about the journey. Don't try to come up with answers. That'll be the next phase, right? So for now, don't slow yourself down. Come up with at least 30, 40, 50 post-its, maybe not, but 20 post-its in the next 12 minutes of aspects of the journey. Things, again, just keep adding to your loves, hates, inspirations, but try to segment it into journey steps. Does that make sense? All right, so let's spend 10 minutes doing that. Go. You have 45 seconds left, but I'm going to give you some more time in a second. I forgot to advance to my next slide, which had more specific things. So think about, you have your profiles done, right? How do your customers live their life? You're thinking about that, the different phases in kind of their journey or journeys in your domain. Love phase here. The other thing that's important, again, if we had real people here, it would be much easier. But it's great if you do have a real person, like if you actually decide to develop any of these concepts, go and talk to people and ask for stories. You'll often find that their little anecdotes, their little stories, quotes, etc., start to develop your profile. So it's going to be tough, but you could imagine a quote or a profile. And one of the other things you should keep doing is asking why. So if, let's say you did have, if you're going to work on prisons, for instance, and someone says that they find it very difficult to have to, what's a good example? Line up for food. Do we have to do anything about this alarm, or is it okay? I think it's your laptop. This is my laptop? Oh, it's that. Oh, I was wondering what that was. Thank you. Thank you. All right, that's better. I thought it was an alarm outside. Anyway, ask for stories deep. So keep going. Sorry, now the timer went off, obviously, but I'll give you guys like 3 more minutes to just add in a bit more. Be sure to think through various journeys, yeah? All right, 3 minutes, go. I'm sorry, but I'm going to have to interrupt you all again. How's it going? Are people making progress? Are we starting to get lots of post-its? Hey, excellent. Good. All right, so we've now gone through the understanding who our customers are, understanding how they live their life. Now we're going to go on to the I phase in Climber. So we've done customer, we've done a bit about their life and their journeys, and now we have to start to identify a possibility. And it's kind of a vague concept, but basically here's where you have to start to think about an idea. Like, what could you do to make this person's life better, right? So if it's Thomas the toddler, if it's Tom the toddler, they now have a whole bunch of loves, hates, frustrations, inspirations. You guys want to tell him just for 30 seconds, who is Tom? What's he like? What's he love and hate?
Well, Tom's a 4-year-old who loves to play outside. He's an only child, and he has a pet dog. He doesn't really like using technology that much, mainly because when he has to play with technology, it means that he can't go outside because it's raining or something like that.
Cool. That sounds good. That's all. I just want them to get a little sense of who you're working on. So that's the customer. They've gone through some life journey mapping. They're also maybe pulling a dog into this, and they've thought about feeding the dog, walking the dog, and things like that, looking for an intersection of the customer and the life things. And now they start to look at this phase. What you all should be doing is starting to look at your loves and your hates, maybe your frustrations and your inspirations, and trying to see if there's some coherence there. Is there something that you could do to make the loves even better? Like, are there parts of Tom's life or something that you could actually boost up? Or Susan at the back, that's Susan, right? Yeah, Susan. Something about the way Susan, the customer, how she spends her life. Is there something that she's really frustrated about that you could think about solving for her? And this is the tough phase, because you sort of have to start to find a bigger picture. And what you might want to do, you'll see there's different size Post-its. There's some bigger Post-its on the table too. You may want to see if you could start to identify some clumps. Like, okay, all of these frustrations are really around technology or around bad process, or these things are around, packaging. I don't know what it might be. So first stage, I guess, is to start to look for coherent themes in there. And I'll show you a couple of examples just to make this a bit more relevant. So here's one. This is a company that does online hotel room bookings. And this is a project that some of my students did for them a few years back. And they had a real problem. Their customers would often go in and they would book a room, and then later they'd cancel it. So they make a reservation at a hotel, they'd shop around, and they'd cancel that one and switch to another one. So that was the company concern, is how can we reduce cancellations? The students used a lot of kind of empathy. They talked to people who book hotel rooms and found out a big part of the problem is just that you don't feel any kind of connection to this online company, right? You book a room, if you could find a lower price somewhere else, you switch. So that was an issue. They realized that consumers had lots of choices. Consumers had no sense of connection to this big nameless laterooms.com company, no sense of commitment to that company, right? You just book a room, doesn't mean anything. Their question was, okay, how might we help customers feel more connected to this company, right? So you could actually solve a lot of these problems. You could address this concern if you could just make customers feel sort of more connected to the company. And what they did was kind of clever. They went to what's called Indebtedness Theory, which is in psychology. It's basically the idea, if I give you something like information, you'll feel a little bit indebted to me. It's not a big deal. It's not a big effect. But it works pretty well, and it's kind of a natural human thing. My brother used to always say, if a cop ever pulls you over, you should ask them for directions. So sorry, I don't know. And then they'll tell you, and then you'll feel a bit indebted to them, but they'll feel a bit indebted to you. Anyway, it's an interesting thing. So the students thought, is there some way to make a sense of indebtedness in the digital domain? And what they did was quite clever, actually. They came up with this idea that this is the standard booking confirmation email that you would get from the hotel. And what they did was exactly the same letter. The only difference is they've added to it this little picture of a plastic hotel room key. So when you get this, you sort of feel, oh, there's my room. Oh, and they've even given me my key. And it's not a real key. It's just a picture of a key, but it actually made a difference. People sort of felt that they had been given something at this point. They were given their room key, and they actually were able to measure. So if you found this room for, this is a different currency, but if you found it for, how much less would it have to be for you to cancel? It actually had to go quite a bit less for you to cancel if you were given your hotel room key. It's stupid, but it's the human brain. That's how it works. So that's one little example. In this one, actually, I don't have the image. I was going to put it in. I forgot to. It's these little bike rentals. Do they have them here? Community bikes. In Boston, they have them. So you go there, and there's bikes, and you can use your credit card and get a bike. And so my students were looking at different ways of making people feel better about the bike. So for instance, some of them targeted business travelers, others targeted families. They came up with various ways. So if you're a family doing bikes, it gets expensive because it's each person, but maybe they could have a family discount. or families on bikes, it's tough because you can't track them all, so maybe there could be some little tracky thing to keep the bikes close together. If you separate, they could beep or something, I don't know, something like that. So that's basically what you're going to be doing now, is you're going to be looking at the challenges and the loves and try to come up with some themes there and some idea for how to make the goods better and how to get rid of the bads. Does that make sense? And usually the way this is done is sort of by looking for problem statements, as it's called. So you want to look at your customer and life findings and come up with some insights. So right now we've been kind of going broad, right? We've been coming up with lots of random post-its, different things they love. And hey, now you want to start to come together into something. Okay, so like it should be something like, how might we do something? How can we get, earlier today, for those of you who are here in the first half, how can we get the people to eat more iron might be one of the guiding statements. So it doesn't have to be an answer yet. It's kind of roughly like, if we could just find a way to get people more confidence in when to cash out of their cryptocurrencies, for instance, or whatever it might be. And here's some examples of some other kind of problem statements. So if you're a student who hates folding laundry, everyone hates folding laundry, how might we make a tool to help this person fold laundry more easily? So you don't have to have an answer yet, right? It's more just a question. Like, if we could just solve this problem, life would be great. So identify a couple of things. If we could just solve this problem or this problem, maybe come up with 2 or 3. Here's like 3 core things. If we could just find a way to do that, we'd make $1 million, right? So that's what you have to do now. So go ahead and spend like 5 or 10 minutes looking at your notes there, trying to identify a couple of key problems that you would love to be able to solve. All right, so let's take 8 minutes. Go. So go ahead and finish up what you're on, and we're about to move on to the next phase. Sorry, I know it's pretty time compressed, but our time is already half up. But you guys have done some great work. As I looked around, I saw some really nice ideas. Things are really moving ahead. So at this point, you've really done a great job of understanding who your customer is, how they spend their life, and you've started to identify some coherent set of issues, if you will, or identified some kind of possibility. The next phase is mechanisms, right? And so it's a weird, awkward word, but I chose it kind of partly because it is a weird, awkward word. Right, so we went through customer, understood how they spend their life, we've identified some possibilities, and now we have to come up with some mechanism, right? And so this is, here we go. Once you identify a problem statement, which is your identified possibility, then you need to come up with some mechanism that could address that. And I'm going to show you a few random examples from different domains. The first one is sort of from banking. This is a little project I did with the National Bank of Malaysia, and they have an interesting problem. Their problem statement was basically this: how can we get coins back in circulation? So these are the guys who, they're like the Federal Reserve, essentially. They print all the money, they manage all the banks and stuff. And one of their problems is really just coins. So they have to buy the coins from Australia. They're printed, minted in Australia, and they buy them in. The cost of the coin is actually, in some cases, more than the value of the coin, which is horrible. And they buy literally millions of these things every year, and they go out and they disappear. They said it's like water on carpet. It just goes out and all the coins disappear. They never come back in. And basically, they know where they go. They go to piggy banks, jars on your nightstand, whatever they are, a little coin thing by the telephone. They just never come back. So they wanted to know, how can we get them back in circulation? So that was their kind of problem statement. Now they had to come up with a mechanism to solve that problem, right? That's our next stage, is mechanism, come up with something. And so in their case, it was a physical mechanism and a process. So the physical mechanism was this. I don't know if anyone saw it. It kind of went around YouTube about a year ago. It's pretty cool. You can make your own coin sorting machine at home. It plays in fast forward, but basically it's cardboard and a little motor, and it shakes and money gets sorted out. So one of them had seen that, and they suggested, okay, what we could do is we could get a social enterprise. We'll pay social enterprises to build these cheap coin machines, and we'll put them on the back of some postal workers. Post office, what do you call them nowadays? Postmen? Postmen, are they? I don't know. What are those people? People who deliver the mail. Mailman, that's the word. Sorry, I spent too long in the UK. Or maybe on the back of garbage trucks. So it's Friday morning, the garbage men are coming. The garbage men, one Friday a month, they come door to door and they say, hey, you have any coins? We'll cash them in for you. And they just pour them in. The problem isn't that people can't take your coins to the bank. The problem is just that people never remember to bring the coins to the supermarket or the bank to cash them in. So the idea here is to bring them to people's houses, which is pretty clever, I thought. So that was a nice example of a mechanism that could address that particular problem that they have. Here's one other example, very different domain. This is actually from banking and finance again, but it's a different kind of problem. This is for Lloyds Bank in the UK. Yeah, Lloyds Bank. They're a big bank. They're a well-known bank in the UK, but they're seen as kind of stodgy, old school, more for corporate things than for everyday banking. Like, they're not the bank that you would go to if you were a college student. And they wanted to be seen instead as an everyday caring bank. So that was their first problem statement. Another problem statement they had is like, also, how can we be seen a bit more as trustworthy? Like, this was right after, banks don't have a great name anywhere right now, but in the UK, that bank in particular sort of got a bad reputation, lost a lot of money. So those were their problem statements, right? So they understood who their customers, life, this is their problem statement. Now, how can they actually come up with a mechanism to address that problem statement? And in their case, it was a TV ad, incredibly successful ad, one of my other favorite ads. So, is it not there? Oh my God, it's not there. Wait, where's my ad? Ah, here it is. Okay, so, well, I mentioned earlier the importance of emotion. This is kind of a nice statistic for those who care about these things. If you want to know whether a TV ad is going to be effective or not, the best predictor is actually if it has what's called branded memorability. So essentially, if I show you an ad, like let's say a Super Bowl ad, and I say, oh, you remember that ad where there were tennis players playing tennis and one of them commented on how white their shirts were? What was the brand? If you can remember the brand, in this case, who remembers? Tide, yeah, it was all Tide. It was all Tide. Some good ads. I thought they were pretty clever. Anyway, the Tide ad. If you can remember the brand, well, that's high branded memorability. There'll be a lot of cases though, oh, remember that ad where they were eating a chocolate bar and one of them laughed and spilled blah, blah. What was the brand? What was the chocolate bar? You won't remember. You'll remember the ad, but not, and that's low branded memorability. Anyway, it turns out if you look at it, the best predictor of an ad's success is how well it's branded memorable. The second best is how much emotion is in the ad. So anyway, in this case, this ad that they did is high on both of those. So see what you think of this ad. Ooh.
This is real life, but none of us are standing still. We are all about to take the next step.
Pretty great ad, right? I mean, it does all the right things. The brand is always there in every single frame, so it's impossible to forget that it is an ad for Lloyds Bank. That's their mascot, I should have said before, but they've always been sort of the black horse is their thing. It's a pretty cute ad, incredibly effective. It worked really well at kind of making them seem relevant to everyday consumers, building a sense of trust. They'll be there at your side. It was also, as a quick aside for those doing marketing, it was also a lovely example of an integrated marketing campaign because they, on their website, right after that aired, they had lots of shots of important moments from the ad. He said yes, things like that. And they carry on to now, actually, just a few months ago, they came out with another ad kind of in the same line, a little bit of a different sort of patriotic undertone, which is a little strange and disturbing. But now it's the same kind of thing. With you through difficult times, they sort of have this other ad campaign where the black horse is running through the streets of the UK. And again, they've done a great job of integrating it to their website and all their other marketing materials. So those are just some examples where you could have, if you have a problem statement like, we want to build trust, then maybe your mechanism will be a TV ad. If your problem statement is around coins, maybe your mechanism will be sort of a coin sorting machine in a process. If your identified problem statement is around hotel cancellations, it might be this other thing. If it's around a certain aspect of a kid's life, now it's when you have to come up with a mechanism. Like, what could you do that would address that problem statement? So that's the next stage, is to think about what mechanism could you make. It might be a feature on an app, it might be a website, it might be some kind of physical interchange, some process, whatever it is. That's why I use the weird word mechanism, because it could really be any of those things. So you have about, we'll say about 10 minutes to come up with some ideas for mechanisms. Actually, I'm going to skip this slide, but I did want to point out, skip. Do I want to do this? It's worth seeing. Okay, this This will be a 3-minute long excursion. It's a nice brainstorming technique which you might find useful here. So this guy's wonderful. I met him at a conference. Oh, hey. Was he there a minute ago? No. All right, sorry. I can't go full screen from YouTube. Oh, it's this guy. Hey. Sorry. This is, by the way, a bug in PowerPoint. Not surprising. All right, so now will it go full screen? It will go full screen. Okay, so this guy, he's a kind of an expert on brainstorming, different ways of coming up with new ideas. And this is another phase. So the previous phase where we had to come up with identifying a problem statement, that's a bit of a mode of focus. You had to come up with an idea. Now we have to come up with a mechanism. And this is one of his techniques called bisociation, which works pretty well. I'm not going to recommend, well, you could try it, see what you think. I'll just play the video and see what you guys think.
The engineer's toolkit is idea generation or ideation. Most people just refer to this as brainstorming, but brainstorming is just one ideation technique, although it's by far the most popular. Unfortunately, the data is out. Brainstorming alone is very limited, especially if you want to generate new and novel ideas and lots of them. The limitation with brainstorming is that we rely on information that's already in our brains, so we're not necessarily making new connections and gaining new insights. So let's talk about one of my favorite ideation techniques, bisociation. Bi, two things, and association, a connection or a relationship that together have the potential to create something new. Let me give you an example. Let's say that we're a manufacturer of stethoscopes, and we want to generate ideas for new and improved stethoscopes that offer more value to our customers and hopefully increase sales for us. When I use traditional brainstorming with teams, we typically get these kinds of ideas. Let's make the chest piece out of a material that's not quite so cold. Let's add a warm-up station in the doctor's office. Let's make these ear tips more comfortable. Let's replace the tubes with Bluetooth technology. Let's use Bluetooth earbuds like the ones I use at the gym. Let's make throwaway covers to reduce the spread of germs. Now these are good ideas, but they're not game-changing ideas. And this is because when we're brainstorming, we're so focused on the existing stethoscope and what we already know. With bisociation, we start by putting the stethoscope aside, and we concentrate on a stimulus that we add to the ideation process. The stimulus can be anything, a picture, an object, an animal, a piece of art. More importantly, it can be related to the ideation subject, like other medical devices, or better yet, it can be totally unrelated to the stethoscope and chosen completely at random. The best and most unique ideas nearly always come from unrelated random stimulus. So the first step in the bisociation process, assuming you already have your objective clearly defined, is to choose the stimulus. For example, I needed some stimulus for an ideation session the other day, so I just grabbed this off my desk. The second step in the bisociation process is for the facilitator to introduce the stimulus and get the group to focus on everything we know about or are reminded of by the stimulus, and we capture all this on a whiteboard. So here's what the list looks like. It's a bag. It's soft. It's made out of cloth. It has drawstrings. It's gray and it's black. It reminds me of a jewelry bag. Reminds someone else of an earbud bag. It reminds me of a rock collection bag. Let's see what's inside. It's a blue cube. It's metal. It has various logos and markings. Looks like a speaker. And of course, a speaker has a magnet, a coil, and a cone. On the back here, it has an on-off switch. So there's likely a battery inside. It has a USB plug for connecting with a computer, for charging and playing music. It also has a headphone plug, which can be used for other devices like smartphones or other music devices. And it plays music. And now for the third step in the bisociation process, generating ideas that make associations or connections between an improved stethoscope and our items on the stimulus list. Here's some examples of ideas generated by a typical team. We could connect the chest piece directly to the speaker cube, so our whole stethoscope is just this. By using the cube, everyone could hear the heartbeat or lungs. We can have the chest piece communicate directly to a computer. We can record the heartbeat for the medical record. We could send the heartbeat directly to the computer and develop software to analyze and display information about the heartbeat. Since the heartbeat is recorded, we can easily get second opinions from specialists. We could record and generate a database of heartbeats with known medical conditions and unique signatures. We could create a new service that analyzes heartbeats that are emailed to us. What if the Cube was super cheap so people could use it at home to record their heartbeats, and so on? Do you see what's happening here? This is awesome. Since we divert our focus from the stethoscope to focus on the Cube, we're opening our minds to new associations and new connections. It's powerful. And we don't stop here. No, no, no. Now we introduce a new stimulus, something completely unrelated to the first, and it can be anything. You might be laughing, but I'm very serious. Antibacterial shark skin, tiny as a grain of sand. It's fun, so a fun stethoscope for kids. Sound travels faster and farther in water. Getting the idea? Remember, we're after both quality and quantity of ideas, and there's bound to be a golden nugget or two when our list reaches 100 or so. Now don't get me wrong, brainstorming is a great place to start. In fact, I start all my ideation sessions with silent brainstorming so that everyone has a chance to get their current ideas on the table. So your mission is to facilitate a bisociation session of your own using random stimulus. Just do it. It's fun.
I will.
And
I
you'll be
will.
surprised at
I'm
the
going to do it
outcome.
right now.
And of course, like any skill, it gets
All right, I'm going to stop. Anyway, so that's what I'm going to ask you all to do. I'm going to give you a little bit more time this time. You have some great ideas. You've identified lots of problem statements. It's now time to come up with some mechanisms. So you've identified possibilities, now you have to come up with some mechanisms. So again, go back and look at your customer notes again, look at your life notes, think about the issue, think about mechanisms that could increase and decrease the bad. Is there some way that you could now create something? Is it an ad? Is it something online, something in store? Is it something on a mobile app? What if money was no limit? Like if you could spend $1 billion on your prison idea, or if you could, if you had to make this thing happen in one day, like if you wanted to postpartum depression awareness day, what would that day be like? You know, or if it had to be online, if it had to be offline, if you had to do it by Facebook or just by a tweet. So what I want you to do right now is to come up with, you know, a lot of different possible mechanisms, and these might be ways to think of others, right? So add a new constraint. I'm also going to go around and pass out a couple of random cards to kind of try the bisociation. Start by just kind of coming up with some ideas on your own. If you get a little stuck, look at the card and write down some of its features and see if they inspire some kind of new idea for new mechanisms. So this will be, like I said, we'll probably spend maybe 12 minutes on this. So 12 minutes, come up with at least 10 possible mechanisms to do some of the ideas, the identified opportunities that you have. Does that make sense? All right, 12 minutes, go. All right, so you guys have about 2 minutes left. Try to switch gears. If you're on one good idea, that's fine. And if you really want to keep going, that's fine. But maybe try, okay, what if we tried it totally differently? What if we had to do it offline, or if we had to do it online, or if we had to only use paper? Try to come up with a second version of something, just for the last 2 minutes. I think time is up. I don't know what happened, but it looks like time is up. I guess that's telling me. Good job. I went around a bit, and it sounds like you guys are onto some really good stuff. We have to move on because we only have about 27 minutes left, and we have to finish this climber model. So the next stage, you guys have done a good job of identifying the mechanisms. So the next stage is the build phase. Just to remind you, it's going to get old after a while, but we started with a customer. We identified a specific customer. We figured out what they're like, etc. We then walked through their life a bit to understand where there's kind of pains in their journey, etc. From all of that, we created lots of different notes, and then we identified some possibilities, something that we could do to make the customer's life a bit better. We had a possibility. Now you guys have come up with a bunch of different mechanisms that might actually work to make their life a bit better. Now it's the build phase. So if this were, you know, physical products, it would actually be physically building. Some of you actually have physical products. I'm just going to show you some examples. Basically, this is like prototyping. You want to build a mock-up of it. So if you're building a Apple launcher, maybe that's your first version of the Apple launcher. If you're an architect building a house, you know, you build this because then someone can actually look at it and put their eye in there and kind of get a sense of what's great, what's not so great. If you're making an app, you could do paper prototyping. You actually print out screens and, okay, you press this button, here's what you would see next. And you could actually walk someone through an app piece by piece. You could also do sort of sketch models of apps. That's another way that designers, as you're using design thinking to craft something, my timers keep going off. You might sketch model, you could do lo-fi and hi-fi. There's all kinds of online tools that you can use to actually craft little mock-ups of what apps might look like. You could walk people through. There's all kinds of different things. And basically this is also linked to the idea of, the idea of prototyping is also linked to the idea of kind of agile software development or lean startup. That's kind of some of the things that you can learn about if you're interested in more. You can learn more about that here, I guess, at the innovation space. It's kind of their approach is kind of this lean startup model. It's a great model because the idea is that, it used to be that if you're making software, you would spend, if you were working for Microsoft, you'd spend a year trying to understand all the user needs and the requirements, and you'd kind of craft your vision, and after a year and a half, you'd kind of have a version of it finally ready, and you'd launch it, and that will be the end of it because there'd be billions of bugs. But nowadays, instead, what happens is you kind of plan roughly, briefly, you design something, you build a rough version of it, you release it to the world, you get kind of immediate feedback, and then you start again. You go through what are called design sprints. And that's kind of the ethos and the philosophy of what happens here. I'm just going to show you one quick, I don't think I have time to go through this. If you're interested in this kind of stuff, this is a great example of design thinking via prototyping. If you Google search for IDEO ATM, there's a great project that they did with some banks in Spain to redesign the ATM machine. It's brilliant what they came up with, so it's really nice. So at this point, though, I want you guys to spend some time thinking about what mechanisms. You already have identified the mechanisms. Now I want you to kind of start to build it. So you don't have to actually make an app or anything like that, but what you could do at this point is to start to, I'm going to do this. I'm going to pass out some big pieces of paper because at the end I'm going to have you come up and explain your mechanism to the room. So I'm going to give you these giant Post-it notes. We had little Post-it notes to bigger Post-it notes. I think my daughter tells me these are just giant Post-it notes. I don't know if I can get them all. Anyway, I will bring these around, or maybe someone can help me figure out. There we go. And what I want you to do is to kind of sketch out how it might work. So this is the screen that the person might see, or this is how they would initially enter the system, or this is how we would intake the person. If it's a process, maybe there's a box here. Stage 1 is identify the issue. Stage 2 is, so basically all you have to do in this point is create some artifact, something that you could use to explain your idea to the rest of the room. Right? That in this today, all we're going to do for prototyping is build something that is enough to describe the mechanism. So you don't have to build the mechanism, you just have to be able to walk someone through the idea. Does that make sense? So you have about 10 minutes to try to come up, thanks. I don't know what this thing is. Come up with something. Feel free to start with Post-its, and then maybe once you have something, doodle it out on this piece of paper. Try to make it big enough so that you can put it up here and explain to everyone else what your mechanism is. Does that make sense? Yay, okay, so like 10 minutes to do that. Go. I'm going to stop us a little bit early, but because we're running out of time. So whoever's doing the drawing, feel free to keep drawing. I'm only going to talk for a minute, and then you're going to do something else. But keep going, just kind of half listen and half work. So at this point, you have done a lot of steps, and we're on the evaluate phase, okay? So, that's my stupid thing again. All right, so we have a customer, we went through their life, we identified a possibility, we've come up with some mechanisms. I should have mentioned that at this point you probably should have chosen one mechanism to kind of go with, but that I guess you probably did, or maybe you did two. You guys have two different mechanisms. That's great. There's different ways, if you're interested in this kind of stuff, there's different ways you can decide which of the mechanisms is better. But anyway, you have something, you've built something, and now it's time to be evaluated, or to have it evaluated, or to kind of evaluate your concept. And realistically, what you should do is you should present your concept to your potential customers. So if it was a toy that you're building, you would have your little prototype, and you could actually show it to 4-year-olds or to the parents of 4-year-olds or whoever it is. Or if it's someone, if you have a cryptocurrency kind of thing, you maybe would show that to people who are interested in cryptocurrency, day trading, finance, etc., and get some feedback. You'd figure out for them kind of what they love about it, what kind of really works for them well, what isn't quite right. It's basically, you ask them to put little concept notes. So what do they think is great? What's not quite right? And if they could add one more thing, what would that one more thing be? All right, so that's kind of the evaluate phase. You show your prototype to someone, and you get them to say what's great, what's not quite right, and if they could add one more thing, what would that one more thing be? And believe it or not, I'm going to actually have us try this. So what I want to happen is half of each group, so one of you, sort of two of you, 1.5 of you, one or two people from each group, basically rotate around this way. So essentially, let's say, two of you guys will go to that table and two will stay. And as soon as that happens, I want whoever is the staying person to roughly explain. You only have 1 minute or 2 minutes to explain the idea to the person. So here's the problem. The problem is we're trying to reduce flooding. Here's one of the ways that might happen is like this. And then the person who's come there said, oh, I see what you're saying. What if this doesn't seem like it would work? What about this? So it's going to be incredibly compressed, but I think it'll still be fun and useful. So everyone, half of each table, rotate around this way, and let's just see how chaotic we can make it. So explain your idea using your written stuff. Yeah? We'll just try it once. So go ahead and rotate. Rotate now. All right, so be sure to get a little thought from the person. What do they think you might want to add? What do they love? Okay, so everyone now should add some additional notes, some additional thoughts. Did you get some feedback? Awesome. All right, okay. Next up. All right, so in the design thinking model, the final stage, we're finally to the end of the climber, right? So we had a customer, we've thought about their life, we identified a possibility, we came up with some mechanism, we built a prototype. This was the evaluate phase, and now what you would do is repeat. So it's pretty straightforward. The only thing that's a little different is it's not literally repeat. The interesting thing in design thinking is it's kind of a non-linear process. So someone may have given you a bit of feedback that actually is awesome and makes you rethink the entire mechanism. So you may have to go back to this is from another kind of approach, but you may have to go back to the empathize phase. Maybe you realize, oh my God, we didn't think about this customer well at all. Let's go back to the beginning. Or you might think, well, that was a great idea, let's tweak our prototype a bit. Or you might have to go back to kind of one of the earlier climber stages. So basically the idea is that in repeat, you look at your mechanism, look at the feedback you got, and sort of revise the mechanism. Change it, adapt it, clean up the concept, make it a bit sharper. And at this point, you have to start thinking about what would the brands look like, what would the features look like. You're sort of ready to go to the final stage. And at this point, we only have 3 minutes left. So raise your hand if you have to really leave at 7:30, or can we take an extra 10 minutes? Raise your hand if you have to leave at 7:30. All right, people do have to leave at 7:30. All right, so we only have 3 minutes. So maybe, can you guys just pitch to the room what your concept is? And the only thing I wanted to mention is that this is another little skill that you'll get. If you keep in mind this climber model, it's also a really good way to make a pitch, right? So if you have let's say you have an idea for a new harvester, wheat harvester. You don't just go in and say, hey, John Deere, I have this wheat harvester. You say, okay, so we know that you have customers who have small farms nowadays. In their life, one of the big issues they face is that they can't harvest the wheat in their field fast enough. We've identified this real problem is that they can't, blah, blah, blah. The mechanism we have is, ta-da, our new wheat harvest robot or whatever it is. So if you want to make a good pitch, I'll just give you as an additional benefit is if you follow the climber model, it's a really good way to make a pitch. So if you have to pitch anything, explain a concept to anyone, that's a really good way to do it. So what I'm going to ask is for each group, to just briefly say, you'll have like a minute. So our customer was blah, blah, blah. This is what his life, we identified this problem, and here's the idea, and here's what it is, right? So let's just try that. I'm curious to hear what ideas people came up with. So if you guys could just go for like 1 minute. Who's your customer? What's their life thing? What was the problem you identified? And what's your thing do?
So our person was Tom, the toddler. So we decided to make an app that was interactive for him and his dog because he likes the outdoors, but some of his toys aren't always portable. And so we decided to make an app that taught him like life skills of like how to take care of his pet. And it was like complete task with his dog.
Nice, awesome. That sounds great. Well done, yay! Pardon? Oh, the mic. Yeah. Sorry. All right. How about you guys? One of you had to leave early. Who's your customer? What's the life like? What's the problem, etc. You don't. Well, why don't you stand here and hold it up so that the camera can see and you can then be immortalized. And if others want to move around to see it better, feel free to kind of. Oh, that's even better. Wait, but now I have to.
This is the mama bear, and we designed it with women struggling with postpartum depression in mind, because it's a pretty common mental illness. Up to 15% of women that give birth have it, and a big issue is feeling guilty for not being there for the baby when they go back to work, like if they're a working mom. And so we made this toy bear to simulate what it's like for the baby to be with the mom. So it moves, it has a heart rate, and its belly inflates and deflates, which is powered by battery, and it smells like the mom from like her spraying her perfume on it, and it's very cozy and soft. And
Awesome.
Babies love it, and so do moms.
That's great. Awesome. Yay. Well done. That's a cool idea. No one makes that yet, eh? That's great. That's a product waiting to happen. All right, crypto team. Maybe you could stand here and hold it this way so camera and humans can see. Or you could even stick it up here. I guess the Post-it stuff is supposed to be.
Is it going to stick?
It should. Guaranteed by Post-it.
Wow, that works.
That's okay.
Go for it. Start.
So we had a guy named Craig who was doing cryptocurrency. So we designed an app that just helps people understand the market better. And one of the big things is that people have to take a course to sign up with the app so they're more educated. And some of the things that come in the app are professional daily video analysis. And you get this with your paid subscription to the app. And there's notifications of when there are major changes in cryptocurrency. So say the price shoots up during the day and you want to sell it, but you don't get an alert at all, you're never going to know that. You miss opportunities.
So yes, the objective was to get an easier entry into this market, because usually, the problem is the market's complicated, and if you won't really take risks, and crypto's a good idea for you, going through training to choosing the coin and choosing what to invest, buy and sell is the best choice.
Nice. Awesome. Well done. Yay. That's great. All right. Student Susan, financial planning. You can just maybe stand here-ish and aim that way, and let's hear what you guys are up to.
So our target market was average middle-aged male or female individual who does not know a lot about finance, but they care about saving some money. We came up with a financial app that basically customizes to their situation. It provides a learning page where they can give them some background knowledge on basic money-saving habits and investing information. Helps them set goals for how much money they'd like to reach, also for saving up for retirement, college funds, etc. It helps them with budgeting by looking at what they're spending and gives them ideas for what they could do better. It also helps them on investing and provides awards for when they've reached their goals and set up. I also didn't include links to their bank account, so all their money is linked up with this.
Cool. And you guys could just take a cut. No. So, that's awesome. Well done. Yay! Financial planning. Awesome. So if anyone has to leave at 7:30, it's now 7:32, so feel free to just ditch out as we finish the last few. I think I just broke the mic. Did I break the mic? No, what is that? Oh, that's part of a pen. Sorry. All right. Who wants to talk?
All right. Oh, I lost one of the issues. That's okay.
I don't know what to
do with it. All right.
Here, wait. Let me put this here.
Yeah. So. Oh, you're holding the mic up there.
I wasn't trying. It won't let me go.
So this is our idea. We were doing prisoners, and we started to talk about just the most out there ideas that we could have for prison reform. So we started thinking about like community ways to involve them in the community, and also to get them sort of a job coming out of the prison and being able to work immediately. So we thought of the most kind of absurd concept that you could think of, which is, what if you turned a convict into a police officer? Reasons for this being, one is that they have been in the shoes of the other convicts, so they kind of know how they think and can understand a lot more where they're at than the police today. It will also, where it could give community a little bit of a feeling of like, wow, there's someone out there who's already done something bad who's now the one enforcing the law. It could kind of sketch some people out, but at the same time, understanding that these people have been trained incredibly well will build trust in the communities throughout everyone. So we just made a really simple process. Of course, it would have to be blown up way more to make it possible. But you see Jim as a convict. There's an application and eligibility when they're still in prison. So this would be not eligible for any convict, but those who are doing minimal crimes or crimes that could, like, they're not questioning the mental state of these people. These are people who could reasonably be taught law enforcement. Then they would be given basic classes in law enforcement, still while in prison. The last step while in prison is when they're pretty much on their way out of jail anyway. They would be able to go to community events kind of as a act-in police officer with a group of other police officers, just as sort of a helping hand. And these are really low stress events. Like we have a sports tournament here. And then after that, after they get out of prison, they could then enlist in the police academy and just be trained along with a group of new cadets. And then
So we thought this would be a really good model because it's helping prisoners with isolation. You know, they could be going to community events and having classes, so they're interacting with people, and they also have a goal for after they get out of prison, and they can, you know, so the issues with re-entering society are minimized, and to kind of help police officers' images too, because they do get a better rap, like they don't know how to treat the people they are interacting with. So if convicts are in the middle of that, that might help ease some of the tensions. And then the community gains too, because they get to get interactions with a better police force and get to get those members who are incarcerated back into the communities.
Nice, awesome, well done. That's great. Wow. All right, and now let me just grab this out of your way. Oh. Last but not least, solving all of third world hunger. No, flooding. Team Flood.
Okay. Do you want to introduce the problem?
Okay. Sorry, wait, let me just get out of the way. I don't know if that's going to help or hurt, but.
Well, the problem we addressed is floods. We found out two solutions, one radical, one more moderate. So she's going to talk about the moderate solution.
Yeah, so our issue was flooding, and that flooding was causing problems to lower income people because of crop yields. So it was decreasing crop yields both in smaller farms and larger scale farms. So the conventional solution was to introduce some wetland mediation to help moderate the flooding. And we were going to try that in one example, headwater watershed, and then see how that worked downstream. And then if that worked well, we could scale it up.
Cool.
Okay, and the other solution was to build some platforms in order to separate the crops from the floor. So if there is any flood, the water will not harm the crops. And also that water can be drained and put in some containers to use as an irrigation system for the crops.
Nice. Awesome. Well done. Yay. Great. All right. Well, there's some, you guys all came up with such good ideas. That's amazing. Well done. I just have a final little slide. It's the climber slide again. No, you've seen that a lot of times. I just wanted to mention a couple of things. So, you know, I wanted you to think about, you don't have to answer this, but like, did it work? I think I personally was impressed. You guys came up with some awesome stuff. And it's weird to think that that was just in like under 2 hours. You came up with some pretty good ideas that actually could go to market in a weird way. And the thing I wanted to point out is also, you know, you could probably think about using it elsewhere, right? I mean, it's the kind of thing that you could, if you have any kind of situation where you can identify a customer, start to talk to them. And in this case, by the way, I should also point out, we didn't even have access to the real customers in most cases. So if you could go and talk to people and really start to map out what are they like, what is their life like, what are the challenges, etc., then you can really identify specific things. This is kind of more general, but I just wanted to mention that here you actually saw some examples of things being used to design products or apps or forum training, apps with training stuff, all kinds of interesting different applications. You can also use design thinking within companies. So like, within a marketing department, I've worked with them to try to come up with new ways of organizing the whole marketing process. So you can use it in lots of different things. Also, the other thing I wanted to mention is that it wasn't difficult, right? So this is design thinking, come up with new ideas. It's not like you needed to find someone who was a rocket scientist, designer, black sweater, RISD graduate. You guys just could do it. It's a simple process that you just follow. As long as you follow the climber process, you'll be fine. Summary, form and context. Start with your customers. That's the most important thing. If you can't take away anything else, remember climber and start with the customers. Those are the main things you have to remember. You may want to think about it if it makes sense to try it for if you're on a team, a club, is there some way you could use design thinking to redesign what you guys are doing? And I guess that's it. I just wanted to thank you for the time. And if you want to get in touch, send me an email, feel free. And that's it. Thanks for coming.